Hello, I'm Esther Gitu. You watch Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up.
U.S. President Joe Biden says he was outraged and heartbroken by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza that killed 7 people working for World Central Kitchen, and he called on Israel to do more to protect aid workers. Doctors in Kenya have rejected a government offer aimed at ending a weeks-long strike that has severely disrupted health services. And in our technology report, Ghana makes strides in promoting women's and girls' participation in STEM fields, challenging gender stereotypes. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54.
We begin in Washington, D.C., where White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says the U.S. is outraged over the Israeli airstrike that killed 7 humanitarian workers. The U.S. is calling on Israel to do much more to improve deconfliction processes so that civilians and humanitarian aid workers are protected. The U.S. senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports from the State Department.
The World Central Kitchen Aid Group, which feeds people suffering due to natural disasters and wars, says it has suspended operations in Gaza after an Israeli airstrike hit its convoy as it was leaving a warehouse loaded with food. A U.S. official confirmed a dual U.S.-Canadian citizen was among the 7 killed. The armored cars carrying food were clearly branded with the WCK logo. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby had this reaction during Tuesday's press briefing.
We were outraged to learn of an IDF strike that killed a number of civilian humanitarian workers yesterday from the World Central Kitchen, which has been relentless in working to get food to those who are hungry in Gaza and, quite frankly, around the world.
World Central Kitchen is run by celebrity chef Jose Andres. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said President Joe Biden reached out to Andres.
The president conveyed he is grieving with the entire World Central Kitchen family. The president felt it was important to recognize the tremendous contribution World Central Kitchen has made to the people in Gaza and people around the world. The president conveyed he will make clear to Israel that humanitarian aid workers must be protected.
Standing with his French counterpart on a visit to Paris, Secretary of State Antony Blinken called the aid workers heroes who must be protected.
We've spoken directly to the Israeli government about this particular incident. We've urged a swift, a thorough, and impartial investigation to understand exactly what happened.
French Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné was more direct in condemning the Israeli strike.
Allow me first of all to express our strong condemnation of the Israeli strike that led to the deaths of 7 humanitarian workers from the NGO World Central Kitchen. Protecting humanitarian workers is a moral and legal imperative that everyone must adhere to.
Israel's military on Tuesday expressed sincere sorrow over the airstrike and said officials are reviewing the incident at the highest levels. Relief experts say Palestinian children and families are on the brink of starvation, and this attack will only make things worse. The war between Israel and Hamas began last October 7th, when Hamas militants stormed into southern Israel, killing some 1,200 people. Israel has responded with a 6-month-old offensive, killing some 33,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza's health ministry. Cindy Sain, VOA News, the State Department.
Pope Francis on Wednesday issued a new appeal for peace in Gaza while deploring the killing of 8 workers with the World Central Kitchen in an airstrike in Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls the deaths an intended and tragic incident. The 87-year-old pontiff has been in poor health in recent weeks, limiting his public speaking or cancelling some engagements during Easter week. But on Wednesday, he participated in full in the outdoor audience. He renewed calls for an immediate Gaza ceasefire, the release of all Israeli hostages kidnapped by Palestinian militants Hamas, full access to humanitarian aid, and warned against any irresponsible regional widening of the conflict.
I reiterate my strong call for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. I express my deep regret for the volunteers killed while engaged in the distribution of humanitarian aid in Gaza. I pray for them and their families. I renew my call for the exhausted, suffering, and civilian population to be allowed access to humanitarian aid and for the hostages to be released immediately. Let us avoid all irresponsible attempts to widen the conflict in the region, and let us work so that this and other wars that continue to bring death and suffering to so many parts of the world may end as soon as possible. Let us pray and work tirelessly so that weapons may cease and peace may reign once again.
The pontiff also paid tribute to a Ukrainian soldier who died in the war against Russia. Crime in the United States is one of the leading issues on voters' minds in this year's presidential election. VOA correspondent Scott Stearns looks at how Joe Biden and Donald Trump are addressing those concerns.
Crime was among the issues motivating primary voters Tuesday in New York, where Joe Biden and Donald Trump were on their party's ballots, despite already securing their presumptive nominations for president. New Yorker Golda Lee, who asked that we not show her face on camera, says she feels less safe.
I just have a sense that there's just an energy and an activity that wasn't there before, both with people who might commit crimes and people who might be afraid of those who do.
Voter Amy Pelletieri says concerns about crime make her more careful about where she goes.
I feel very safe riding the subways. I know crime is up, and I've seen it on the news. I haven't personally witnessed it myself, so I know it's there, but I feel like if I'm safe and responsible and know to avoid certain situations that could be scary for me, I'll be okay.
In this election, Trump is campaigning as a law and order candidate, vowing to strengthen local police. He was in New York last week at the wake for an officer killed during a traffic stop.
We have to stop it. We have to get back to law and order. We have to do a lot of things differently because this is not working. This is happening too often.
A Harvard Capps-Harris poll last month showed U.S. voters see crime and drugs as among the top issues facing the country, more important than health care, terrorism, and climate change. Even though the latest FBI data shows that violent crime in the United States dropped last year across the country in both large cities and small. Biden points to those declining crime numbers as evidence of his administration's success with law enforcement. His campaign is pushing back against Trump's attacks over crime by linking him to the January 6, 2021 attacks on the U.S. Capitol that disrupted Congress's certifying the presidential election, a race that Trump lost. A Biden campaign event included law enforcement officers who were at the Capitol that day.
You don't have to wonder what would happen to our democracy and our Constitution if Trump is elected again. He's telling us, he has shown us, and on January 6th will look like a rehearsal if we can, and we cannot depend on Trump Republicans to defend the Constitution, since they also have sided against law and order and the rule of law.
The Biden campaign says Trump's law and order claims are undermined by his multiple felony indictments. Trump says those charges are election interference from a weaponized judiciary. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Tuesday discussed with Chinese President Xi Jinping a range of high-level issues and reiterated his request that China not use web-based disinformation tools to interfere with the U.S. presidential election. The two leaders also discussed Taiwan, the island China claims as it prepares to inaugurate a new leader next month. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Washington.
The White House described Tuesday's phone call between President Joe Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping, which follows their in-person meeting last year, as candid and constructive. This time, the two covered a range of issues they had previously discussed in November, including joint counter-narcotics efforts, military communication, and the risks of artificial intelligence.
We believe that there is no substitute for regular communication at the leader level to effectively manage this complex and often tense bilateral relationship. And both presidents agreed to pick up the phone and speak when needed.
Xi, in a statement, said both leaders found the phone call to be candid and constructive. But he stressed that disagreements remain, notably about the status of Taiwan, which China claims. In his statement, Xi said the China-U.S. relationship is beginning to stabilize, and this is welcomed by both societies and the international community. On the other hand, the negative factors of the relationship have also been growing, and this requires attention from both sides. The White House said Biden reiterated, but did not advance, previous concerns about Chinese interference in the upcoming U.S. election. Xi did not mention the topic in his account of the call.
I would just say that we've been clear consistently, even going back to the November meeting in California, about our concerns over our own election security and efforts by certain actors, including some from the PRC, to affect that.
Just last month, the British Parliament voted to impose sanctions over Beijing-linked hacks of its Electoral Commission and Parliament. U.S. intelligence officials have also warned lawmakers that Chinese hackers are preparing to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to the U.S. China's government last month showcased how it uses digital tools to bolster, not hamper, democracy. But analysts point to a state-sponsored Chinese influence campaign known as Spamouflage that does the opposite and encouraged Biden to push back.
There needs to be a very clear and consistent communication about election interference. And I don't just mean hacking into voting systems, which in itself is obviously one of the most heavy-handed forms of election interference, but even the ones that involve manipulating public opinion in deceptive ways, or even just trying to discourage people from voting, which we have seen from operations that have been linked to China in the past.
The White House did not say when the two leaders would next speak, but Xi, in his statement, said he welcomed this week's visit to China by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
The Kenyan doctors' strike is causing a health crisis for vulnerable patients. Over 7,000 union members have walked off the job over back pay and the immediate hiring of trainee doctors. The union says the back pay stems from a 2017 collective bargaining agreement. Doctors are also demanding medical insurance coverage for themselves and their dependents. For more on the strike, I'm joined live from Nairobi by Macharia Munene, a history and international relations professor at the United States International University. Professor Munene, first of all, do you see the strike now in its third week ending anytime soon?
Not very soon, because both sides seem to be digging in. They are not negotiating. Instead, they are shouting at each other. So it is not likely to end very soon.
But the government is saying it has paid their salaries in arrears. It's promising to meet demands to hire trainee doctors as well, beginning Thursday, which is tomorrow. Why won't they return to work?
Well, they listen to the union. What the government has promised or says it has released is likely to cover those who are in the national category, not every doctor. They are complaining that all doctors are not catered for in that, and the strike is about all the doctors. So they have that problem. To add to that is that the credibility of the government has been wanting, and because of that credibility gap, it has a problem, people accepting.
And how has this impacted, patients around the country, especially given, that most people can't afford to go for medical services at private hospitals?
Well, the country is devastated. The patients are suffering. Some have died for lack of attention. You can't go to any hospital. Most people don't have the money to go to private establishments. And so the suffering is widespread, and it appears as if there is not very much concern about the suffering of the people.
Professor Macharia, I'm thinking about accident victims here. We've seen a lot of accidents. Nearly every week, a lot of people are dying on Kenyan roads, and including school children, college students as well. And I'm thinking about how many people would be seeking emergency services in a situation like this. Where do they go to? Really, can't the doctors do something about this?
Well, they should, but they are not doing. Those who are lucky go to private hospitals or maybe mission hospitals and places like that, which are ready to accept, at least for them, for the emergency purposes. But the government hospitals are demobilized, demoralized, and nothing is happening there. So when accidents happen, it just, people are lucky to go to some of the private hospitals, which are then obligated to receive them as a matter of emergency. And thereafter, you have a serious problem of what happens.
Professor, how are Kenyans reacting to this strike?
They are devastated, they're disillusioned. They see failure in policy, because that's what it is. There is failure in national policy on matters of health. I think the country made a mistake in 2010 when it tried to divide health and say some of it is national and the other one is devolved. That was a mistake that needs to be looked at. And there is general feeling that something went wrong. And the policymakers are failing the country, because ultimately it is the policymakers who are in trouble for failing to look after the interest of the country, of the doctors and the health workers everywhere.
Professor, thank you very much for talking to us about that situation. Macharia Munene is a history, Macharia Munene is a history and international relations professor at the United States International University in Nairobi. Still to come, we'll introduce you to handwriting robots. Stay with us.
This week on Straight Talk Africa, the United States and South Africa have long enjoyed a strong relationship, but recent disagreements over the actions of the Israeli military in Gaza and Russia's invasion of Ukraine have caused a rift. How will this affect the future of US-South Africa relations, and how might it impact the upcoming presidential elections in the Southern African nation? Join me, Hayley Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
According to World Economic Forum, an estimated 100 million people in Africa suffer from clinical depression, and 66 million of them are women. On this week's edition of Our Voices, we'll seek to understand more about depression, which has been described as the most prevalent mental illness in the world. We'll also speak with experts on how depression is treated. Join the conversation each week, right here on Our Voices.
In other news, Uganda's Constitutional Court on Wednesday has rejected a bid to overturn a controversial anti-gay law that is considered one of the toughest in the world. The Anti-Homosexuality Act 2023 imposes penalties of up to life in prison for consensual same-sex relations and contains provisions that make aggravated homosexuality an offense punishable by death. Zimbabwean president has declared a state of disaster over a devastating El Nino drought sweeping across much of southern Africa. President Emerson Mnangagwa says the country needs $2 billion for humanitarian assistance. Drought has scorched crops, leaving millions of people in need of food assistance. And Ousmane Sonko is the new Prime Minister of Senegal after being appointed by new President Bassirou Diomaye Faye in his first act as head of state. Sonko, an opponent of former President Macky Sall, is popular among the West African nation's youth, but was barred from the March 24th presidential election due to a defamation conviction. He has denied any wrongdoing. Not long ago, people wrote letters by hand, but now technology has started writing those letters. VOA's Julie Tabo introduces us to handwriting robots.
Old-fashioned letter writing is making a comeback. While writing letters by hand were once part of day-to-day life, computers made the job easier and faster, leaving behind that personal touch. But now, a company based in Phoenix has revived that tradition with robots that use real pens to write letters in a style chosen by the user.
I think what's old is new again. Receiving a handwritten note appeals not only to your eyes, but the feel as well. And that means a lot.
Their main clients are businesses that use handwritten letters and thank you notes to create stronger connections with their customers.
The people we're really targeting are nonprofits, helping a nonprofit receive a redonation. One of the biggest issues facing nonprofits is the redonation rate is sub 50%. The number one reason people don't redonate is they don't feel thanked. So we help these nonprofits reach out in a more meaningful way through handwritten notes.
Automated letter writing isn't new. President Thomas Jefferson used this polygraph device in the early 1800s so he could keep copies of his correspondence. Jefferson considered the machine a marvel of technology. An inventor himself, he recommended several improvements to his British manufacturers. 200 years later, the process includes machine learning and high-tech manufacturing.
The technology involved is 3D printing and laser cutting and electrical circuit board design for the robot itself.
And if users need help thinking of exactly what to write in their note, they can choose the AI Assist button to help them generate a better message through its ChatGPT function. While robots may never fully replace the personal touch of a handcrafted note, the team at Handwritten believes they come close. Julie Tabo, VOA News.
Ghana is making strides in promoting women's and girls' participation in STEM fields, challenging gender stereotypes and changing mindsets. This initiative is gaining momentum and is seen as a promising step toward the future of STEM education. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho has more. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Esther, and thanks and more robots. With the increasing demand for skilled workers in robotics and automation, it's crucial to introduce Ghanaian students to the world of robotics from an early age. Here is Jonathan Kennedy, CEO of Innovev Tech Center in Accra, Ghana, with more perspective.
We started a girl-powered workshop where we bring mentors, women who are doing amazing things in the field of STEM to empower these young girls. We introduce girls to robotics, to coding, digital skills, technical vocational skills, and it was impressive. So that is what we are doing at our corner of the world to empower young girls to participate or get into the tech and then the STEM field.
When we talk about girls, what numbers are we looking at, or what ages are we looking at?
So with the girl powered, we start from the ages of 4, so from 4 years and above. So we had students who were 4 years, and then we have students as old as 20 years coming in, and it was impressive. Young girls, we believe that to change the situation, you have to start from this foundation. So creating that change, you have to start as young as they are when they show their interest, or we'll build our interest in them. So we start very early.
What's the response been like? Are you trying to crisscross the entire country, going to different schools, different universities, trying to give these young women tools that can benefit them in the future?
We've partnered with a number of organizations and universities. So we've been going to universities to work with them to empower young girls and men as well. So we are working. We are currently working with a couple of schools to empower their young girls. Second is for the people that believe in what we are doing, the sponsors. STEM is for everyone. People that actually believe that you are doing something. Sometimes you do something and people are somewhere, oh nah, they don't actually see what you are doing. But then people are there who see it, like yourself, Janelle, and then other prominent women who believe in what we are doing. They support our initiatives. They dedicate their time, their resources. Going forward, we are actively looking for support to get these robotics kits and then enough laptops or tablets for the students so that they can each have one and then be able to learn effectively.
How do you get funded? How do you get your funding?
Yes, so we self-fund, we believe in sustainability, so most of our projects we fund it ourselves. And then I'm really grateful for our international sponsors that like sponsor us when we need resources. We reach out to them, they send it to us. I'm also grateful for the local sponsors, the people that we work with that support our work.
When you go to some of these schools, high schools, universities, what kind of support do you get from there?
Most of the schools we've been to, they are very supportive. Some schools accommodate us. They take care of the feeding, accommodation, transportation of the instructors. So and then some provide resources like the technical resources we would need to have an effective program, and logistics as well.
What keeps you going? How do you keep doing this day in, day out?
It's the fulfillment I get, the fulfillment I get in seeing the aha moment when a kid takes a breadboard and some jumper wires and then an LED and then connect it and then it blinks. That moment when they program a robot and then it moves, when it performs a certain function, and then they start to believe in themselves that I can do something, taking them from I cannot do anything to okay, I have this potential, I can do something amazing. It intrigues me.
How many people have you empowered this far?
So we've reached 17,000. As at last year we were at 15,000, but to match from then to March we've been able to reach about 17,500 students.
And this is across Ghana?
This is across Ghana, yes. We've been having some programs outside Ghana as well with our partners in other African countries.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you too, Paul.
That was Jonathan Kennedy, CEO of Innovate, a STEM center in Accra, Ghana. That's today's Tech Report. Back to you, Esther.
Thanks, Paul. Be sure to join Paul Ndiho every Wednesday for his technology report on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.